The stranger who changed everything. There comes a moment in life when you achieve everything you've ever dreamed of. The perfect home, a soaring career, a bank account that never sleeps. But then, you look in the mirror, and the person staring back is a stranger. My name is Arthur, and I was standing at that very precipice. I had everything, and yet I had nothing. I had forgotten the reason to wake up in the morning. I didn't know then, but the most profound lesson of my life was waiting for me on a crowded, rain-slicked street in the form of a complete stranger. This isn't just a story. It's the story of my second chance at life, a life that began with a single, devastating question. Arthur's life was a meticulously crafted piece of art, admired from a distance, but devoid of a soul. As the creative director of the city's most prestigious advertising agency, he was the architect of dreams. He sold happiness in glossy packages, luxury cars, exotic vacations, and fragrances that promised eternal love. His campaigns were legendary, his name synonymous with success. His apartment, a sterile palace in the sky, was a testament to his achievements, offering a panoramic view of the city that lay at his feet. But this success had been purchased at a steep price, the currency of his relationships. His wife, Eleonora, whom he once lovingly called Ellie, had left him 5 years ago. Her parting words were a ghost that haunted his quiet evenings. "You bought everything in this city, Arthur, except for my time." His daughter, Lily, was now in college, a stranger who communicated through brief, obligatory phone calls twice a year. Each call was a painful reminder of the chasm that had grown between them. Arthur's days were a monotonous loop of expensive coffee, solitary breakfasts, and a relentless parade of meetings, deadlines, and hollow plastic smiles. He was a master at crafting narratives for others, yet his own life's story was a tale of profound regret. He often wondered, is this what true success feels like? The silence that answered was always deafening. He was a man trapped in a gilded cage of his own making. It was a Tuesday evening, indistinguishable from any other. A relentless rain washed over the city, blurring the neon lights. Stuck in the gridlock of rush-hour traffic, Arthur felt a familiar wave of emptiness wash over him. That's when he saw him. Huddled under the meager shelter of a bus stop, an old man, perhaps in his late 70s, sat with a quiet dignity. His clothes were worn but clean. It wasn't the man himself that caught Arthur's attention. It was his umbrella. He was holding it not over himself, but over a young woman and her small child who had taken refuge from the downpour. The old man sat slightly exposed to the rain, his shoulder getting damp, yet his face held a serene, untroubled smile. A strange feeling stirred within Arthur. This simple, selfless act of kindness was an anomaly. "Who does that anymore?" he muttered to himself. On a sudden, unexplainable impulse, Arthur steered his car to the side of the road. He didn't know why, but he felt an overwhelming compulsion to speak to this man. By the time he reached the bus stop, the woman and her child had gone. The old man was alone, carefully folding his wet umbrella. "Excuse me," Arthur said. The old man looked up, and his eyes, clear and bright, crinkled at the corners as he smiled. "Yes, son?" Arthur felt a sudden awkwardness. I saw you with the umbrella. You were getting wet." The old man chuckled, a warm, gentle sound. "Rain is just water, son. It wets the body, but it cannot touch the soul. It is turning a blind eye to someone in need that truly dampens the spirit." The simplicity and depth of the statement struck Arthur. "I'm Arthur," he said, extending a hand. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Arthur. I am Samuel," the old man replied, his grip surprisingly firm and warm. Arthur, acting on an impulse he hadn't felt in years, invited Samuel for a cup of coffee. To his surprise, Samuel agreed. They found a small, quiet cafe nearby. Seated across from Samuel, Arthur found himself falling back into his old habits. He talked about his agency, his successful campaigns, and his status. Samuel listened patiently, offering nothing but a gentle, knowing smile. When Arthur's monologue finally ran out of steam, a comfortable silence settled between them. Then Samuel leaned forward slightly and asked a single question. "Arthur," Samuel began, his voice soft but clear, "if your life were a storybook, would you want to read it again?" The words hung in the air, piercing through years of denial and self-deception. A storybook. Would he want to reread it? The chapters where he missed his daughter's school plays? The pages filled with arguments with his wife over broken promises? The long, lonely paragraphs describing his hollow victories? The answer was a resounding, soul-crushing no. For the first time in his adult life, in front of a complete stranger, Arthur felt the sting of tears welling up in his eyes. He saw his life for what it was, a bestseller that its own author couldn't bear to read. Samuel placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Every story has room for an edit, son. The book isn't finished until the final chapter is written. This can be your second chance story." "How?" Arthur whispered, his voice cracking. Samuel's smile returned, this time filled with infinite compassion. "You haven't lost anything, Arthur. You have only lost your way. Perhaps you just need to hear a different kind of story." And so, in that small cafe, Samuel began to tell a story. It was a simple tale about a lighthouse keeper named Elias, who lived on a small, isolated island. Elias's only job was to keep the light burning, to guide the ship safely to shore. For 50 years, he did his job flawlessly. He polished the great lens, fueled the lamp, and never once let the light go out. He believed his purpose was the light itself. One day, a young sailor was shipwrecked on his island. As Elias nursed the young man back to health, the sailor asked him, "Do you ever get lonely out here, just you and the light?" Elias replied proudly, "The light is my companion. My purpose is to ensure it shines brightly for all to see." The young sailor looked at him and said, "But sir, the ships aren't grateful for the light. They are grateful for the keeper who keeps it burning. Your purpose isn't the light. Your purpose is the lives you save. The light is just your tool." Samuel paused, letting the words sink in. That night, for the first time, Elias looked past the beam of light and out into the vast, dark ocean. He didn't see a void. He saw the countless lives he had touched, the families he had kept whole. He realized his purpose wasn't in the shining object, but in the connections it created. Arthur sat in stunned silence. He was Elias. His career, his success, his awards, that was his lighthouse. He had spent his entire life polishing the lens, but he had forgotten about the ships. He had forgotten about his wife and daughter. "Your work, your creativity, that is your light, Arthur," Samuel said gently. "It is a beautiful and powerful tool, but it is not your purpose. Your purpose is to use that light to connect, to warm, to guide, not just your clients, but the people who are waiting for you to guide them home." Arthur left the cafe that night as a different man. The emptiness inside him had been replaced by a flicker of hope. He didn't get Samuel's phone number. He knew, somehow, that their meeting was a singular, serendipitous event. The next morning, Arthur woke up before his alarm. He didn't reach for his phone to check emails. Instead, he walked out onto his balcony and truly saw the city for the first time. He saw not just buildings, but homes. He saw not just traffic, but people on their way to live their own stories. His first act was the hardest. He picked up the phone and called his daughter, Lily. When she answered, her voice cautious, he simply said, "Lily, I was just thinking about the day we built that terrible-looking birdhouse in the backyard. I miss that day. I miss you." There was a long silence on the other end. Then, for the first time in years, he heard a warmth in her voice. "I miss you too, Dad." His next step was even bolder. He walked into his agency and announced a new initiative, a pro bono division dedicated to helping small, nonprofit organizations tell their stories. He wanted to use his light to help those who were making a real difference. He started leaving work at 5 p.m. He took up painting again, a passion he had abandoned in college. His canvases, once blank, began to fill with color. One evening, he was working on a painting of a rainy street scene. He painted a small bus stop and an old man holding an umbrella over a mother and child. A year later, Arthur was in a park watching his daughter Lily laugh as she played with a small dog she had recently adopted. Their relationship was slowly healing. He had even reconnected with Eleonora. They weren't back together, but they were friends. The anger and regret had been replaced by understanding and peace. His pro bono division at the agency had become a huge success, not in terms of profit, but in terms of impact. He had found his purpose. As he sat there, bathed in the warm afternoon sun, he thought of Samuel. He took out a small, leather-bound journal he now carried everywhere. On the first page, he had written, "If my life were a storybook, would I want to read it again?" He smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached his eyes. He finally had his answer. Yes, he absolutely would, because this was his life-changing story. It was a story where the script was never truly finished, where every day was a new page, an open invitation to add a line of kindness, a paragraph of connection, a chapter of hope. His life was at last an open script, and he couldn't wait to see what he would write next.